The desert didn't care if you lived or died, it just watched. Alara Vance had been walking for 3 days with nothing but the clothes on her back and a cast-iron skillet tied to her belt. The sun had burned her skin raw. Her lips had cracked open and bled. Her boots, stolen from a dead man 2 towns back, were falling apart at the seams. Every step sent pain shooting up through her ankles, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and she wasn't ready to die yet. Not here. Not like this. The frontier stretched out in every direction, endless and indifferent. Dust devils spun across the flats. Buzzards circled overhead, patient as undertakers. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to fall and stay down. She'd seen it happen before. Bodies left to rot under that merciless sky, picked clean by scavengers who didn't ask questions and didn't care about names. She wasn't going to be one of them. Alara had no destination in mind. No plan. No hope. Really, beyond the next mile. She'd left everything behind in a town she refused to name, fleeing a life that had tried to bury her alive. All she had now was forward, one foot in front of the other. Breathe. Walk. Survive. The skillet banged against her hip with every step, a dull rhythm that kept time with her heartbeat. It was the only thing she'd taken when she ran. Well, that, and the small locket hidden beneath her shirt, pressed against her breastbone like a splinter of ice. She didn't open it anymore. Couldn't. The face inside was too painful to look at, a reminder of what she'd lost and could never get back. By the 3rd day, she was hallucinating. She saw water where there was none, heard voices in the wind, felt phantom hands pulling at her sleeves. Her vision blurred, her legs buckled. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. The skillet slipped from her belt and hit the ground with a clang that echoed across the emptiness. She stared at it for a long moment, lying there in the dirt like an accusation. Pick it up, she told herself. Pick it up and keep walking. But her hands wouldn't move. Her knees gave out. She collapsed beside the skillet, tasting dust and blood, and closed her eyes against the brutal white glare of the sun. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was as far as she got. She thought about the locket, about the face inside, about all the things she should have said and never did, about the life she'd lived and the one she'd lost, about the man who tried to own her, and the night she'd finally fought back. The world began to fade. Then she heard hoofbeats. At first she thought it was another hallucination, her mind playing tricks, offering false hope in her final moments. But the sound grew louder, more insistent, real. She forced her eyes open and saw a figure on horseback, silhouetted against the sun, riding toward her at a steady trot. Alara tried to sit up, couldn't, tried to speak. Her throat was too dry. All that came out was a broken rasp that didn't sound human. The rider dismounted and crouched beside her. A shadow fell across her face, merciful and cool. She blinked up at the stranger, struggling to focus. Through the haze she saw a weathered face, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of iron. A woman. No, she corrected herself, squinting harder. A man. Hard to tell at first glance. The face was all angles and edges, carved by wind and work, and something darker. You alive? The voice was low, rough, completely without sympathy. Alara tried to answer. Her lips moved, but no sound came. The stranger reached down and tilted her chin up, inspecting her with the detached efficiency of someone evaluating livestock. You're half dead. Maybe more than half. A pause. Can you ride? Alara shook her head, barely. Can you hold on? She didn't know. She tried to nod. The stranger stood, walked back to the horse, and returned with a canteen. Water touched Alara's lips, warm, metallic, the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. She drank too fast and choked. The stranger pulled the canteen away. Slow. You'll make yourself sick. Alara gasped, coughed, tried again. This time she managed a few careful sips. The water hit her stomach like a stone, but she kept it down. After a moment, the stranger offered it again. Alara drank. The world steadied, just slightly. What's your name? The stranger asked. Alara. Her voice cracked on the syllables. Alara Vance. Where you headed, Alara Vance? Anywhere, she swallowed. Anywhere but where I was. The stranger's expression didn't change. You running from something or toward something? Does it matter? Might. Alara looked away. out across the flats toward nothing. I'm running. That's all you need to know. Silence stretched between them. The stranger studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, as if coming to some private decision. I'm Rowan Hale. I run a ranch about 6 miles west, Ironwood Ranch. You familiar? Alara shook her head. Cattle operation, couple dozen hands. We work hard, we eat well, and we don't ask too many questions. Rowan stood and brushed the dust off worn leather chaps. I could use another cook. Last one quit. Couldn't handle the isolation. Or the men. Probably both. Alara stared. You're offering me work? I'm offering you a chance. You take it or leave it. But if you stay out here, you'll be dead by nightfall. Buzzards are already circling. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't even charity. It was cold calculation. Rowan needed a cook, and here was someone desperate enough to say yes. Alara understood that. She'd lived her whole life in transactions just like this one. The difference was, this time she had a choice. She could die here in the dust. Or she could gamble on one more day. What do I have to do? She asked. Cook. 3 meals a day. Keep the kitchen clean. Don't poison anybody. Rowan's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Think you can manage that? Alara looked down at the skillet lying in the dirt beside her. She reached out, fingers trembling, and picked it up. The weight of it was familiar, grounding. She'd used a skillet just like this one in another life, in a kitchen that no longer existed, cooking for people who were gone now. I can cook, she said. Rowan extended a hand. Then let's go. Alara took it. Rowan's grip was strong, calloused, pulling her to her feet with surprising ease. The world tilted and spun. Alara swayed, caught herself, forced her legs to hold. You're going to ride behind me, Rowan said. Hold on tight. If you fall off, I'm not coming back for you. Alara nodded. She didn't have the strength to argue, and she suspected Rowan wasn't bluffing. They rode west into the sinking sun, Alara clinging to Rowan's back with what little strength she had left. The landscape blurred past, scrub brush, red rock, endless sky. She closed her eyes and focused on breathing, on holding on not falling. She must have blacked out at some point because the next thing she knew, they were standing still. Voices surrounded her. Hands pulled her down from the horse. She stumbled, legs buckling, and someone caught her before she hit the ground. Easy now, easy. The voice was younger, gentler. Alara forced her eyes open and saw a boy, maybe 16, 17, holding her upright with surprising strength. He had a kind face, freckled and sunburned, with wide brown eyes that looked genuinely concerned. You all right, ma'am? He asked. She's half-starved and sunstruck, Rowan said from somewhere behind her. Get her to the bunkhouse. Let her rest. Tomorrow we'll see if she can actually cook. The boy nodded and guided Alara across hard-packed dirt toward a low wooden structure. She was vaguely aware of other people watching, men in dusty work clothes, leaning against fence posts, staring with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. She didn't meet their eyes, didn't have the energy. Inside the bunkhouse, it was dim and cool. The boy helped her to a narrow cot in the corner, and she collapsed onto it, every muscle screaming. He brought her more water, a piece of hard bread. She ate slowly, mechanically, tasting nothing. Name's Tommy, the boy said. I do odd jobs around the ranch. Anything you need, you just ask. Alara nodded. Thank you. Boss don't usually pick up strays. Tommy smiled uncertainly. But I'm glad you're here. We ain't had a decent meal in weeks. I'll do my best. That's all anybody can do. He stood. You rest now. Kitchen's through the back door of the main house. Boss'll show you in the morning. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Alara lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. Rough wooden beams, cobwebs in the corners, a single oil lamp flickering on a hook. The mattress was thin and lumpy, but it felt like luxury after 3 days on the ground. She closed her eyes. She was safe. For now. She had a roof over her head and food in her stomach and work waiting for her in the morning. It wasn't much. It wouldn't last. Nothing ever did. But it was enough to keep her alive another day. And right now, that was all she needed. Morning came too soon. Alara woke to the sound of roosters and men shouting. Her body ached in places she'd forgotten existed. Her head throbbed. Her throat was still raw, but she forced herself upright, splashed water on her face from a basin by the door, and pulled her hair back into a rough braid. The face in the small cracked mirror was a stranger's, gaunt, hollowed out, eyes too large and too dark. A thin scar ran from her right eyebrow to her hairline, a souvenir from a night she didn't talk about. She touched it briefly, then looked away. Outside, the ranch was already awake. Men moved between buildings with purposeful efficiency, leading horses to the corral, hauling water, repairing fences. The land stretched out in every direction, brown and endless, bordered by distant mountains that looked blue in the early light. It was harsh country, unforgiving, the kind of place that killed you if you weren't careful. She found the main house exactly where Tommy said it would be, a large, weathered structure with a wide porch and a sagging roof. She climbed the steps and pushed through the back door into the kitchen, and stopped. It was a disaster. Pots crusted with burned food sat piled in a basin. The stove was covered in grease. The floor was sticky with spilled something or other. Flies buzzed lazily around a basket of rotting vegetables. The whole room smelled like spoiled meat and neglect. Elara stood in the doorway and took it all in. For a moment, just one, she considered turning around and walking back out into the desert. It would be easier, cleaner. But then she saw the skillet hanging on a hook by the stove right where she'd left it the night before. Tommy must have brought it in. She walked over and took it down, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. A kitchen was a kitchen. Didn't matter if it was in a fine house or a broken-down ranch or the middle of nowhere. The work was the same. The rules were the same. Clean, organize, cook, feed. She could do this. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. First the dishes, scrubbing away weeks of accumulated filth until the pots gleamed. Then the stove, scraped and scoured until the cast iron showed through. The floor took longer. She hauled bucket after bucket of water, scrubbing on her hands and knees until her back screamed in protest. The vegetables went into the compost. The counters got wiped down. The flies got chased out. By mid-morning, the kitchen looked almost civilized. Rowan appeared in his doorway, arms crossed, watching her work. You didn't run. Elara didn't look up from the pot she was drying. Not yet. Good. Rowan stepped inside, boots loud on the clean floor. Men eat at noon and again at sunset. Breakfast is on their own. You need supplies, there's a storeroom through that door. Anything else? You ask me. How many men? 23, plus me. Any of them got dietary restrictions? Allergies? Rowan's eyebrow lifted slightly. This is a cattle ranch, not a hotel. They eat what you give them or they go hungry. Elara nodded. Fair enough. One more thing. Rowan's voice dropped, taking on an edge. Some of these men, they're rough. They've been out here too long, away from civilization, away from consequences. They'll test you, push boundaries. You stand your ground, you'll be fine. You show weakness, they'll eat you alive. I'm not weak. No. Rowan looked at her with something that might have been respect. I don't think you are. They stood there for a moment, measuring each other in silence. Then Rowan nodded once and left. Elara turned back to the stove and started pulling out ingredients. She had 4 hours until lunch. The men filed in at exactly noon, loud and dusty and smelling of sweat and horses. They crowded around a long wooden table, scraping chairs against the floor, talking over each other in rough voices that filled the small dining room. Elara watched from the kitchen doorway as they settled. Tommy was there, sitting at the far end. He caught her eye and gave her an encouraging smile. Most of the others ignored her completely. Most. Not all. There was one man, older, with a thick gray beard and mean little eyes, who stared at her openly. Assessing. She'd seen that look before. It made her skin crawl. She forced herself to hold his gaze until he looked away first. Small victory. She'd take it. All right, Rowan called out, standing at the head of the table. New cook starts today. Her name's Elara. You treat her with respect, or you answer to me. Clear? A few nods, mostly silence. Good. Eat. Elara brought out the food, platters of fried beef, roasted potatoes, a pot of beans seasoned with salt pork and onions, biscuits still warm from the oven. It wasn't fancy. She'd worked with what was available, which wasn't much, but it was hot, and it was real, and it was a hell of a lot better than whatever they'd been eating before. The men dug in without ceremony, shoveling food onto their plates like they hadn't eaten in days. For a while, the only sound was chewing, the scrape of forks on tin plates, the occasional grunt of satisfaction. Then someone spoke up. "This is good." It was Tommy, predictably. "Really good." "Damn sight better than the slop Carter used to make," another man said. "Carter couldn't cook worth a damn," someone else added. "Remember that stew he made? I think he killed a rat and threw it in the pot." Laughter rippled around the table. The tension eased slightly. Alara felt something loosen in her chest. Just a fraction, but enough to breathe a little easier. The man with the mean eyes, his name was Dutch, she'd learn later, wasn't laughing. He was still staring at her. "Where are you from?" he asked loudly, cutting through the conversation. The table went quiet. Alara met his gaze. "East." "East where?" "Just east." "That ain't an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Dutch's face darkened. "You got a mouth on you. And you got a lot of questions for someone who just met me." A few of the men snickered. Dutch's jaw tightened. Rowan leaned back in the chair, watching the exchange with unreadable eyes but saying nothing. This was a test. Alara could feel it. "You running from something?" Dutch pressed. "Aren't we all?" Alara said evenly. "I asked you a question, and I answered it. If you don't like the answer, that's your problem, not mine." Dutch stood up, chair scraping back. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and thick through the middle. He took a step toward her. "You think you're clever?" Alara didn't move, didn't flinch. "I think you should sit down and finish your meal before it gets cold." "You don't tell me what to do, woman. Then stop acting like a child and I won't have to." The room held its breath. Dutch's hand moved toward his belt. Alara saw it, the telltale shift, the familiar prelude to violence. She'd seen it 100 times before. Her own hand moved instinctively to the knife tucked into her apron pocket, fingers wrapping around the handle. "Sit down, Dutch." Rowan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Not loud, not angry, just absolute. Dutch froze. "She's right," Rowan continued. "Your food's getting cold and you're making a fool of yourself." Dutch's face went red. For a moment, Alara thought he might actually swing at Rowan, but then he exhaled hard through his nose, turned, and dropped back into his chair. He picked up his fork and stabbed at his potatoes with exaggerated violence. The table slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed. Plates were cleaned, seconds were served. Alara went back to the kitchen on shaking legs. She leaned against the counter and forced herself to breathe slowly. Her hand was still in her pocket, still gripping the knife. She made herself let go. That could have gone very badly, but it hadn't. She'd stood her ground. She'd won. Barely. Tommy appeared in the doorway with a stack of empty plates. "You okay?" "Fine." "Dutch's—" He hesitated. "He's trouble. Always has been. You watch yourself around him." "I will. But the rest of them, they're all right. And the food really was good. Best we've had in months." Alara managed a small smile. "Thanks, Tommy." He grinned and headed back out to collect more dishes. Alara turned to the stove and started planning dinner. The days began to blur together into a rhythm. Wake before dawn. Start the fire. Make coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Prep breakfast. Ingredients for the men who wanted them. Then lunch. Always the biggest meal of the day because the men worked hard and needed fuel. Clean up. Prep dinner. Serve. Clean again. Collapse into bed. Repeat. It was exhausting. Backbreaking. Her hands were constantly raw from scrubbing. Her feet ached from standing. Her shoulders burned from hauling water and chopping wood and stirring pots that seemed to weigh more every day. But it was also good. Not happy. She wasn't ready for happy. But steady. Predictable. Safe in its own way. The men started to warm to her, slowly. They'd nod when she passed. Thank her for meals. One morning, she found a jar of preserves on the kitchen step with a note. From the Johnson homestead. For the new cook. She didn't know who'd left it, but she made biscuits with the jam that afternoon and watched grown men nearly fight over the last one. Tommy became a fixture in the kitchen, always volunteering to help wash dishes or chop vegetables or carry heavy pots. He talked while he worked, told her about the ranch, about the men, about the land. She learned that Rowan had built ironwood from nothing, buying it cheap after the previous owner went bust during a hard winter. That most of the hands had nowhere else to go. that the ranch was barely profitable, always one bad season away from collapse. "But boss keeps it running," Tommy said with obvious admiration. "Somehow. Always does." Alara asked fewer questions than she answered. She kept her past locked tight, parceling out only the smallest details when absolutely necessary. Yes, she'd cooked before. No, she'd never worked a ranch. Yes, she knew her way around a kitchen. No, she didn't have family waiting for her. The lies came easily. She'd been practicing them for years. At night, alone in the bunkhouse, she'd take out the locket and hold it in her palm, feeling its weight. She never opened it, couldn't bear to see the face inside. But knowing it was there helped, somehow. A reminder that she'd loved once, that she'd been loved, that before everything went wrong, there had been something worth protecting. She'd failed to protect it, failed completely. But maybe, just maybe, she could protect this. This fragile new thing she was building here, this kitchen, these meals, this small circle of safety she was carving out of the wilderness. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Keep on it. 3 weeks in, everything changed. Alara was in the kitchen making bread when she heard shouting from outside. Male voices, angry and getting louder. She wiped flour from her hands and stepped onto the porch. 2 men were squaring off in the yard, Dutch and another ranch hand named Cole, younger and leaner, with nervous energy written all over him. They were chest to chest, faces red, both shouting at once. "You cheated," Cole yelled. "The hell I did," Dutch shoved him back. "You're just a sore loser. I saw you palm that card." "You calling me a liar?" Other men had started gathering, forming a loose circle around the fight. Some looked entertained, others wary. Nobody stepped in to stop it. Alara scanned the crowd and didn't see Rowan anywhere. Of course not. The boss was out checking fences in the north pasture, wouldn't be back until sunset. Dutch threw the first punch. Cole went down hard, blood spurting from his nose. He scrambled back up and launched himself at Dutch, both men grappling in the dust. The crowd started shouting, some cheering, some placing bets. It was turning into a spectacle. And Alara had seen enough. She went back into the kitchen, grabbed the biggest pot she had, a cast iron monster that took both hands to lift, and filled it with cold water from the pump. Then she marched back outside and pushed through the ring of spectators. "Move," she said flatly. They moved. She walked right up to the fighting men and dumped the entire pot of water over both of them. They broke apart, sputtering and shocked. The crowd went silent. "What the hell?" Dutch started. "Dinner's in 2 hours," Alara said, her voice cutting through his protest. "And I'll be damned if I'm serving it to a bunch of children rolling around in the dirt like dogs. You want to fight? Take it outside the ranch. Otherwise, get cleaned up and get back to work." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, pot swinging at her side. Behind her, someone laughed. Then someone else. Within seconds, the whole crowd was laughing, not at her, but at Dutch and Cole standing there dripping wet and looking utterly bewildered. Dutch's face went purple with rage. "You don't—" "She's right." It was one of the older hands, a man named Frost with gray in his beard and a reputation for fairness. "You two are being idiots. Save it for town if you gotta punch somebody." Cole wiped blood from his nose and nodded grudgingly. Dutch looked like he wanted to argue, but the moment had passed. The crowd was already breaking up, men drifting back to their chores. Alara didn't wait to see what happened next. She went back to her bread dough, hands shaking slightly with leftover adrenaline. That evening, when the men filed in for dinner, Cole and Dutch sat at opposite ends of the table. Neither looked at the other, neither looked at her, but Tommy caught her eye and grinned. Small victories. A month into her time at Ironwood, Alara started to notice things. The way the men talked to each other was changing. Fewer fights, more cooperation. They'd gather in the dining room earlier than necessary, sitting around the table talking about their day, sharing stories. The meals had become something more than just fuel. They'd become a ritual, a gathering place. She also noticed the way they looked at her, not with Dutch's hostile suspicion or the initial wariness of strangers, but with something closer to respect, maybe even trust. It was unsettling. She'd spent so long being invisible, or worse, being property, being controlled, being something to be used and discarded, that being seen as an actual person felt foreign, wrong somehow, but also not entirely bad. Rowan noticed too. "You're good at this," the rancher said one evening, leaning against the kitchen doorframe while Alara cleaned up after dinner. At cooking? At managing them. The men. Rowan gestured toward the now empty dining room. They respect you. That's not easy to earn out here. Alara scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a pot. I just feed them. You do more than that. You listen. You don't judge. You don't play favorites. Rowan paused. You remind them what it's like to be human. That matters more than you think. Alara didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. She just kept scrubbing. Rowan was quiet for a moment, then, You planning to stay? I don't know. That's honest. I don't make long-term plans anymore. They never work out the way I expect. Fair enough? Rowan pushed off the doorframe. Well, for what it's worth, you're welcome here as long as you want to stay. You've earned that. After Rowan left, Alara stood alone in the quiet kitchen and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not completely. Not permanently. But enough. And for now, that was everything. The first frost came early that year. Alara woke one morning to find the world transformed, every surface coated in delicate white crystals, the water in the basin frozen solid, her breath misting in the air. She dressed quickly, layering on every piece of clothing she owned, and hurried to the kitchen to start the fires. The men stumbled in that morning looking half-frozen, hands numb, faces raw. Alara had hot coffee waiting, along with thick porridge sweetened with molasses and topped with precious butter hoarded from town. They ate in grateful silence, thawing out slowly. Winter's coming early, Frost observed, cradling his mug of coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. Always does, someone else muttered. Boss says we need to bring the cattle down from the high pasture before the real snow hits, Tommy added. Gonna be a long few days. They filed out shortly after, heading into the cold to do work that would break most men. Alara watched them go and felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Concern, maybe. These rough, difficult men who'd become part of her daily rhythm. She pushed the feeling aside and got back to work. But that afternoon, when a rider came galloping into the ranch yard shouting for help, everything stopped. Accident in the north pasture. Cole's hurt bad. Alara was on the porch before she'd made the conscious decision to move. How bad? Horse threw him. He ain't moving right. Might be his back. Ice flooded her veins. She'd seen back injuries before. Seen men paralyzed. Seen them die slowly, screaming. Rowan appeared from the barn, already moving toward a saddled horse. Get the wagon. Carefully. Don't move him unless you have to. I'm coming with you, Alara said. Rowan looked at her sharply. This isn't... I know field medicine. I can help. It was a lie. Mostly. She knew enough to be dangerous, had patched up enough injuries in her old life to have some idea what to do. But mostly she just couldn't stand there doing nothing while someone might be dying. Rowan studied her for half a second, then nodded. Get in. They rode hard, the wagon bouncing over rough ground, Alara holding on tight to keep from being thrown. When they reached the north pasture, they found Cole lying in the dirt, conscious but gray-faced with pain, surrounded by worried ranch hands. Alara dropped to her knees beside him. Cole, can you hear me? Yeah. His voice was tight. Hurts. I know. Where? Everywhere. But mostly, he tried to gesture and gasped. My leg. Think it's broken. Alara looked down. His right leg was bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. Definitely broken. Badly. We need to stabilize it before we move him, she said. Find me something straight. Wood, metal. Anything rigid. The men scattered, returning moments later with fence posts and torn pieces of cloth. Alara worked quickly, her hand steadier than she expected, splinting Cole's leg as best she could while he bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. Good, she murmured. You're doing good. Almost done. When the splint was secure, they carefully loaded him into the wagon. Cole passed out halfway back to the ranch, which was probably a mercy. They got him settled in the bunkhouse, leg elevated, covered in blankets. Alara stayed with him while Rowan sent someone to town for a doctor. He gonna make it? Tommy asked quietly from the doorway. I think so. If infection doesn't set in. Alara wrung out a cloth in cool water and laid it across Cole's forehead. But he won't be working anytime soon. That's all right. We'll manage. Tommy hesitated. You did good out there. Real good. Alara didn't answer. She just kept watch, monitoring Cole's breathing, adjusting the blankets, waiting for the doctor who might not come in time. It was going to be a long night. Cole survived. The doctor, a tired man who smelled of whiskey and disappointment, arrived the next morning, examined the leg, and declared Alara's field splint adequate. High praise, apparently. He'll need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks, the doctor said, longer if he wants it to heal properly, and he'll probably walk with a limp for the rest of his life. But he'll walk, Rowan said. He'll walk. That was enough. Cole stayed in the bunkhouse, frustrated and restless, while his leg healed. Alara brought him meals, changed his bandages, listened to him complain about being useless. Gradually, reluctantly, he started to soften toward her. "You didn't have to help me," he said one afternoon. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Alara thought about that. "Because nobody helped me when I needed it, and I remember what that felt like." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Word of what she'd done spread through the ranch. The men started looking at her differently, not just with respect, but with something warmer. Gratitude, maybe. Or recognition. She was one of them now, not an outsider, not a stranger, part of Ironwood. It should have felt good. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because the more she belonged here, the more she had to lose. And loss was something Alara Vance knew far too well. Winter came down hard. Snow piled up against the buildings. The wind howled across the flats like a living thing, hungry and mean. The men worked in brutal conditions, coming in each night half frozen, exhausted down to their bones. Alara kept the kitchen warm and the food hot. Thick stews that could warm you from the inside out. Fresh bread every morning. Coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Poor. She found herself staying up later, making sure everyone had seconds, refilling mugs, listening to their stories. They talked about their lives, where they came from, what they'd lost, why they ended up here at the edge of the world. She listened and rarely spoke. But one night, Dutch cornered her. He'd been drinking, they all had, passing around a bottle of rough whiskey to ward off the cold. Most of the men were already half asleep at the table. Dutch was alert, though. His eyes tracked her as she moved around the kitchen. "You're a mystery," he said suddenly. Alara didn't look at him. "Not really. Don't give us your name. Don't talk about where you're from. Got a scar on your face and hands that know how to hold a knife," said. He took another drink. "Woman doesn't end up out here by accident. Neither does a man. I ain't hiding nothing. Neither am I. I just don't talk about it." Dutch stood up, swaying slightly. "You know what I think? I don't particularly care what you think, Dutch. I think you're running. I think you did something bad and you're hiding out here hoping nobody finds you." Alara's hand stilled on the pot she was washing. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "You're drunk." "Don't mean I'm wrong." She turned to face him fully. "What do you want, Dutch? You want me to confess some great sin so you can feel superior? You want dirt you can hold over me? Or do you just want someone to bully because you can't control anything else in your miserable life?" His face darkened. "Watch your mouth." "Or what? You'll hit me?" She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think you're the first man to try? You think I'm afraid of you?" Dutch took a step forward. Rowan's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. "That's enough." Neither of them had heard the boss come in. Rowan stood in the doorway, face hard as stone. "Dutch, get out. Boss, I was just out. Now." Dutch looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Rowan's expression stopped him. He grabbed his coat and stumbled out into the cold, slamming the door behind him. Silence filled the kitchen. "Thank you," Alara said quietly. "Don't thank me. Just tell me. Is he right? Are you running from something?" Alara met Rowan's eyes. She could lie. Should lie. It would be safer. But she was tired of lying. "Yes," she said. Rowan nodded slowly. "Is it going to follow you here?" "I don't know. Maybe. If it does, will it bring trouble to my ranch?" "I hope not, but I can't promise." Another long silence. Then Rowan sighed. All right. We all got ghosts. Mine are just as ugly as yours, I'd wager." Rowan moved to the coffee pot and poured a cup. But here's the thing. I don't care about your past. I care about right now. And right now, you're the best cook this ranch has ever had. You keep the men fed and the kitchen running. That's worth more than whatever you left behind. Alara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. Rowan took a sip of coffee. But if trouble does come looking for you, I need to know, so I can be ready. I'll tell you. Good enough. Rowan set down the mug and headed for the door, paused. Get some sleep, Alara. You look exhausted. So do you. A hint of a smile. We all are. That's ranching. After Rowan left, Alara stood alone in the quiet kitchen and let herself breathe. She'd told the truth. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough. And the world hadn't ended. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe, just maybe, she could have this. This life. This place. Maybe. The winter deepened, and with it came a quiet Alara hadn't experienced in years. Not peace, she didn't trust peace, but something close to it. A rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Almost safe. She rose before dawn each morning, lighting the stove while the world was still dark, watching her breath fog in the cold air. The kitchen became her kingdom, her fortress, the one place where she had control. Flour and salt and heat, these were things she understood, variables she could manage. The men continued to surprise her. They'd started helping without being asked, hauling water, chopping wood, even washing their own dishes sometimes. Tommy had become a permanent fixture, showing up every evening to dry plates and talk about everything and nothing. He told her about his family back east, parents who'd died of fever, a sister he'd lost track of years ago. You remind me of her sometimes, he said one night. The way you move. Real purposeful, like every action matters. Everything matters, Alara said quietly. Or nothing does. Haven't figured out which yet. Tommy thought about that. I think you believe everything matters. Otherwise you wouldn't work so hard. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because he was right. And that truth sat heavy in her chest like a stone. Rowan had started joining her in the kitchen after the men finished eating, sitting at the small table in the corner with a mug of coffee, not saying much. Just present. It should have felt intrusive. Alara valued her solitude, but instead it felt companionable, like they'd reached some unspoken understanding. One evening, Rowan asked, You ever think about what comes next? Next how? After winter. After this? You planning to move on when spring comes? Alara scrubbed at a pot, considering. I don't know. Are you asking me to leave? No, opposite actually. I'm asking if you'd consider staying permanently. The pot slipped from her hands, clattering into the basin. She caught it before it fell completely, her heart hammering. Permanently? I'd pay you proper wages. Not much. Ranch doesn't bring in enough for much, but fair. You'd have your own room in the main house. Real bed, privacy. Rowan paused. Security. Security. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Why? Alara asked. Because you're good at this. Because the men respect you. Because this place runs better with you in it. Rowan met her eyes. And because I think you need somewhere to belong as much as this ranch needs you. Alara turned away, gripping the edge of the basin. Her hands were shaking. I can't promise I won't have to leave. If my past catches up, then we'll deal with it. You don't know what you're offering to deal with. Then tell me. The words were there, pressing against her throat. The truth she'd carried for so long it had become part of her bones. But before she could speak, the door banged open and Frost stumbled in, face pale. Boss, we got a problem. Rowan was on their feet instantly. What kind? Rider coming in hard from the east. Looks official. Alara's blood turned to ice. Rowan caught her expression. Stay here. Let me handle this. But Alara was already untying her apron, her mind racing through possibilities. Official could mean law, could mean someone looking for her, could mean the end of everything. She followed Rowan outside despite the order to stay put. The rider pulled up in the yard. A young man in a deputy's badge, his horse lathered and breathing hard. He dismounted quickly, urgent but not hostile. You Rowan Hale? I am. Deputy Carson, out of Silverton. We got a situation brewing in town. Gang of men causing trouble, roughing people up, making threats. Sheriff asked me to ride out to the nearby ranches, see if we can get some help. Relief crashed through Alara so hard she nearly staggered. Not looking for her, not about her past, just regular frontier violence. Rowan's expression didn't change. What kind of help? Bodies. Men who can handle themselves. Sheriff's putting together a posse to run these bastards out before they dig in permanent. When? Tomorrow at dawn. Meet at the sheriff's office. Rowan nodded slowly. I'll bring who I can spare. The deputy tipped his hat and rode off into the gathering dark. Rowan turned to find half the ranch hands gathered on the porch, having heard everything. I need volunteers, Rowan said. This is dangerous. Could get bloody. Nobody's required to go. Every hand went up. Rowan's jaw tightened. I only need 5. The rest stay here to keep the ranch running. Frost, you're with me. Tommy, I'm going, Tommy said quickly. You're 17. Old enough to shoot, old enough to help. Rowan looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't. Fine. Dutch, Reeves, Garrett, you're in. Everyone else stays. We leave before first light. The men dispersed to prepare. Alara stood frozen on the porch, watching them go. 6 people riding into danger because it was the right thing to do. Because someone asked. Because that's what you did out here. She thought about the locket under her shirt, about running instead of staying, about all the times she'd chosen survival over courage. Rowan paused beside her. You all right? No. Yeah, me neither. Rowan hesitated. Keep things running while I'm gone. If we're not back in 3 days, don't. If we're not back in 3 days, Rowan continued firmly, you take whatever money's in the safe and you pay the men. Tell them to scatter. Don't try to hold this place alone. That's not going to happen. Probably not. But if it does, I need to know you'll be smart about it. Alara wanted to argue, wanted to say something brave and defiant. Instead, she just nodded. Rowan squeezed her shoulder once, brief, solid, and walked away. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. She kept thinking about Tommy's eager face, about Frost's steady competence, about Rowan's quiet certainty, about how people she'd started to care about were riding into danger and she was staying behind. Finally, well past midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. She'd send them off with a proper breakfast. It wasn't much, but it was what she could do. She was pulling out supplies when she heard footsteps behind her. Dutch stood in the doorway, looking more sober than she'd seen him in weeks. Can't sleep either? He asked. No. He moved into the kitchen, keeping his distance. Look, before we leave tomorrow, I wanted to say something. Alara waited. I've been hard on you since you got here, harder than I should have been. He looked down at his hands. Truth is, you scare me. I scare you? You walked in here with nothing and made yourself essential, made everyone respect you, even like you, and you did it without compromising, without playing weak, without any of the games most people play. He finally met her eyes. That kind of strength. It reminds me I ain't as tough as I pretend to be. Alara didn't know what to say to that. Anyway, Dutch continued, if something happens tomorrow and I don't come back, I wanted you to know. You earned your place here, fair and square, and I'm sorry I made that harder than it needed to be. He left before she could respond. Alara stood alone in the kitchen, Dutch's words echoing in her head. She'd never considered that her presence might threaten people, that her refusal to break might make others feel fragile. She thought about that while she worked, kneading dough with more force than necessary, trying to process feelings she didn't have names for. By the time dawn broke, she had breakfast ready. Eggs, bacon, fresh biscuits, strong coffee. The men ate quickly and quietly, the usual morning banter absent. They were gearing up mentally, Alara realized, preparing for what might come. She packed food for their saddlebags, filled canteens, made sure everyone had eaten their fill. Tommy came to say goodbye last, his young face trying hard to look confident. You be careful, Alara told him. I will. I mean it, Tommy. You stay close to Frost. You listen to Rowan. You don't try to be a hero. Yes, ma'am, he grinned. You sound like you care. Maybe I do. His grin softened into something more genuine. We'll be back before you know it, and then you can tell me you told me so when nothing bad happens. I'm holding you to that. She watched them ride out, 6 figures disappearing into the gray morning light. The remaining ranch hands stood with her, silent and worried. Then, Because standing around wouldn't help anyone, she got them back to work. The next 3 days were the longest of Alara's life. She threw herself into maintaining the ranch's routine, cooking, cleaning, helping with chores she'd normally avoid. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. The men left behind were restless too. They worked harder than necessary, pushing themselves to exhaustion. Nobody said it, but everyone was thinking the same thing. What if they don't come back? On the second night, a winter storm rolled in. Snow came down in thick sheets, wind howling like something alive and angry. Alara stood at the window watching it, thinking about 6 people somewhere out in that weather. Were they safe? Were they cold? Were they still alive? She touched the locket through her shirt and made herself a promise. If they came back, she'd tell Rowan the truth. All of it. No more secrets. They deserved that much. The storm lasted through the night and into the next day. By afternoon, the snow was knee-deep and still falling. The remaining hands brought the horses into the barn, secured everything that could blow away, and hunkered down to wait it out. Alara made soup, gallons of it, and kept the fires burning high. She moved through the kitchen mechanically, her mind somewhere else entirely. It was nearly sunset when someone shouted from the yard, "Riders coming in!" Alara's heart leaped. She ran to the window, wiping frost from the glass with her sleeve. Through the falling snow, she could see shapes approaching, horses, multiple riders, moving slowly but steadily. She was out the door before she'd made the conscious decision to move, running through knee-deep snow toward the arriving group. The cold bit through her clothes, but she didn't care. 6 riders. She counted them twice to be sure. 6. They were all there. Relief hit her so hard she nearly fell. She caught herself against the fence post, breathing hard, watching as they dismounted. They looked exhausted, bloodied, but alive. All of them alive. Tommy saw her first. "Miss Alara, we made it!" She wanted to hug him, which was absurd. Instead, she just nodded, not trusting her voice. Rowan walked over, limping slightly, face drawn with fatigue. "We're back." "I can see that. It got rough, real rough. But we got the job done. Anyone hurt bad?" "Some cuts and bruises. Reeves took a bullet to the shoulder, but he'll live. Doc patched him up before we left town." Alara finally found her voice. "Get inside, all of you. I'll get food ready." They trudged into this house, leaving trails of snow and blood. Alara got the fire roaring, put soup onto heat, made coffee strong enough to resurrect the dead. She moved between them, assessing injuries with practiced efficiency, cleaning cuts, wrapping bruises, making sure Reeves's bandage was secure. "You missed us," Dutch said, wincing as she cleaned a gash on his forearm. "Don't flatter yourself." But her hands were gentle, and he noticed. He didn't comment, just let her work. They ate like starving men, soaking up soup with bread, warming themselves from the inside out. Gradually, the tension eased. Stories started flowing. The fight in Silverton, the gang they'd routed, the close calls and lucky breaks. There was this one bastard, Garrett was saying, must have been 6.5 feet tall, built like a damn bear. Came at me with a knife the size of my forearm. I thought I was done for, but then Boss just appeared out of nowhere and cracked him over the head with a shovel. "A shovel?" someone asked. "A shovel," Rowan confirmed dryly. "It was what I had available." Laughter rippled around the table. It felt good, normal, like maybe everything would be okay. Later, after the men had gone to bed and the kitchen was clean, Rowan found Alara sitting on the porch despite the cold. "You should be inside," Rowan said. "So should you." Rowan sat down beside her, groaning slightly. "Getting too old for this." "You're not old." "Feel it sometimes." They sat in comfortable silence, watching snow fall through the darkness. Finally, Alara said, "I was terrified you wouldn't come back. But we did. But you might not have. And I realized—" She stopped, gathering courage. "I realized I would have regretted not telling you the truth." Rowan waited. Alara took a breath. "I was married, back east, to a man who seemed decent at first. Charming, successful. Everyone thought I was lucky." Her hands clenched in her lap. "But he wasn't decent. He was controlling, possessive, violent when he didn't get his way. I tried to leave twice. Both times he found me, brought me back, made sure I understood what happened to women who embarrassed him. She could feel Rowan listening, silent and attentive. Then I got pregnant, had a daughter. Her voice cracked slightly. Lily. She was perfect. And for a while I thought, maybe he'll change. Maybe having a child will make him better. He didn't change, Rowan said quietly. No. He got worse, more controlling, more violent, but I stayed because I was terrified of what he'd do if I tried to take her and run. Alara touched the locket through her shirt. Then Lily got sick, fever, came on fast and wouldn't break. I begged him to get a doctor. He said doctors cost money we didn't have, even though he spent twice that on whiskey every week. He said she'd be fine. She had to stop, swallow hard against the grief rising in her throat. She wasn't fine. She died 3 days later, 3 years old. Alara, after the funeral, something in me broke. I couldn't stay. Couldn't breathe in that house anymore. So I waited until he passed out drunk, took the locket, the only thing I had of hers, and I ran. He reported me to the law, claimed I stole from him. The locket was technically his property, like everything else. Like I was. That's why you're running. That's why I'm running. He's probably still looking. Men like him don't let go. They don't forgive. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, what was his name? Why? Because if he shows up here, I want to know who I'm shooting. Alara looked over sharply. Rowan's expression was deadly serious. You don't have to do that, Alara said. Yes, I do. You're part of this ranch now. We protect our own. You don't know what you're saying. He has money, connections. He could bring the law down on all of you. Let him try. Rowan met her eyes. I meant what I said before. I don't care about your past. You've earned your place here through work and integrity. Whatever you left behind, whatever mistakes you think you made, that's not who you are now. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've watched you for months, seen how you treat people, how you handle yourself. That's not someone who deserves to be hunted. Rowan stood, wincing slightly. Get some sleep, Alara. Tomorrow's a new day. And whatever comes, we'll face it together. After Rowan went inside, Alara sat alone with her revelation hanging in the cold air. She'd told someone, really told them, and the world hadn't ended. She pulled out the locket and for the first time in months, opened it. Lily's face looked back at her, round cheeks, bright eyes, a smile that had lit up entire rooms. The grief hit fresh and sharp, but underneath it was something else, something that felt almost like acceptance. I'm still here, she whispered to the tiny portrait. I'm still fighting. That has to count for something. The next morning brought clear skies and brutal cold. The storm had passed, leaving everything covered in pristine white. Alara woke feeling lighter somehow, despite the heaviness of what she'd shared, telling Rowan had released something she'd been carrying too long. She was starting breakfast when she heard horses approaching. Not the familiar sound of the ranch hands moving around, but deliberate hoofbeats from the road. Her heart kicked hard. Too soon for trouble, she told herself. Just a traveler, a messenger, nothing to panic about. But when she looked out the window, her blood froze. 3 riders, well-dressed, well-armed, moving with purpose. And leading them was a face she recognized. Marcus Grayson, her husband's brother, the one who'd always looked at her like property, like something to be used and discarded. He'd found her. Rowan appeared beside her at the window. You know them? The one in front. Marcus Grayson, my husband's brother. They here for you? Yes. Then let's go find out what they want. Rowan, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Rowan was already moving toward the door. Stay behind me. Let me handle this. They walked out onto the porch together. The ranch hands, sensing trouble, began drifting in from various buildings. Dutch, Frost, Tommy, all of them positioning themselves strategically around the yard. Marcus dismounted slowly, his eyes scanning the ranch before settling on Alara. A smile crossed his face that made her skin crawl. Alara Vance, he said. Or should I say Alara Grayson? You've been difficult to find. Alara forced herself to stand straight. I'm not a Grayson, not anymore. The law disagrees. You're still my brother's wife, and you stole from him. I took what was mine. A locket worth considerable money, gold and rubies, as I recall, property of the Grayson family. Marcus took a step forward. I'm here to retrieve it, and you. She's not going anywhere, Rowan said flatly. Marcus's attention shifted. And you are? Rowan Hale. I own this ranch. Ilara works for me. Well, Mr. Hale, I appreciate you giving shelter to my sister-in-law, but I'm afraid she needs to come home now. Family business, you understand. I understand you're trespassing, and I understand she doesn't want to go with you. What she wants is irrelevant. She's a thief and a runaway wife. I have legal authority to take her back. Show me the papers. Marcus's smile tightened. I don't need papers to reclaim my brother's property. You do on my land. Rowan's hand rested casually near the gun at their hip. So either show me legal documentation that says you can take her, or get back on your horse and ride out. The two men with Marcus shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their own weapons. The ranch hands moved in response, a subtle closing of ranks. The air crackled with potential violence. Marcus looked around, calculating odds. You're making a mistake, Mr. Hale. My brother is a powerful man. He has connections. He can make life very difficult for you. I've had difficult before, didn't kill me yet. You're willing to risk your ranch for a woman you barely know? I'm willing to protect someone who's earned protection. That's not the same thing as risk. That's called having principles. Marcus's expression hardened. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You're leaving. Now. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus laughed. A cold, bitter sound. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, but you will. He remounted his horse. The other two riders followed suit. They turned and rode back the way they'd come, but slowly, deliberately. A message that they'd be back. Nobody moved until they were out of sight. Then Rowan turned to Ilara. You all right? She realized she was shaking. He'll come back. With more men. Maybe with the law. Probably. You shouldn't have done that. You should have let me go. Not happening, Rowan addressed the gathered ranch hands. Everyone heard that. We might have trouble coming. Anyone wants to leave, now's the time. No judgment, no hard feelings. Nobody moved. We stick together, Frost said. That's how it works. Damn right, Dutch added. Tommy nodded vigorously. We're not letting them take Miss Ilara. Ilara felt something break open in her chest. These men, these rough, difficult men she'd fed and tended and slowly come to care about, were choosing to stand with her, choosing her over safety. I don't deserve this, she said quietly. Maybe not, Rowan replied, but you've got it anyway. That's what family means. Family. The word settled over her like a blanket. She'd lost her family once, lost it completely. But maybe, just maybe, she'd found a new one here in this harsh place, with these hard people. What do we do now? She asked. We prepare. We make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. Rowan looked around at the assembled group. And we don't let them take what's ours. The men dispersed to their tasks, but there was a new energy now, purpose. They were circling the wagons, preparing for a fight that might be coming. Ilara went back to the kitchen because it was what she knew, what she could control. She made bread and stew and coffee, feeding the growing anxiety with familiar motions. Tommy found her there later, looking worried. Miss Ilara, can I ask you something? Of course. That man, your husband, is he really that bad? She thought about lying, about softening the truth. But Tommy deserved honesty. Worse, she said. He's the kind of man who believes people are things to be owned, and when his things don't behave, he breaks them. Then we definitely can't let him take you back. It might not be your choice, Tommy. If he brings the law, then we'll deal with the law. But we're not just handing you over like you're a piece of furniture. He paused. You matter, Miss Ilara, to all of us. You made this place feel like home. We're not giving that up without a fight. After he left, Ilara stood alone in her kitchen and let herself cry. Just for a minute. Just enough to release the pressure building behind her eyes. Then she dried her face, straightened her shoulders, and got back to work. Because whatever was coming, she'd face it standing up. She'd run far enough. The waiting was worse than any fight could have been. Days passed with no sign of Marcus Grayson or his men. The ranch settled into an uneasy routine, everyone going through the motions of normal work while constantly watching the horizon. Men kept rifles closer than usual. Conversations were quieter, more tense. Even the weather seemed to be holding its breath, the sky gray and heavy with snow that wouldn't fall. Ilara threw herself into cooking with almost manic energy. If her hands were busy, her mind couldn't spiral into the dark places it wanted to go. She made enough food to feed twice their number, experimenting with recipes she'd never tried before, anything to keep moving. Rowan noticed, of course. Nothing got past Rowan. "You're going to work yourself to death," the rancher said one afternoon, finding Alara in the kitchen covered in flour and exhaustion. "I'm fine." "You're not sleeping, barely eating. You shake every time someone rides up." Alara slammed a pot down harder than necessary. "What do you want me to say? That I'm terrified? That I can't stop thinking about what Marcus is planning? That every day he doesn't show up makes me more convinced he's coming back with something worse?" "Yes. I want you to say all of that, because pretending you're fine doesn't help anyone." Alara sagged against the counter. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Let people fight for me. Let them risk themselves. I've spent my whole life making myself small, staying quiet, not being worth the trouble. And now," her voice cracked, "now people are choosing to stand between me and danger, and I don't know how to carry that weight." Rowan moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. "You're not carrying it alone. That's the whole point. We're all carrying it together." "That doesn't make it lighter." "No, but it makes it bearable." Before Alara could respond, the door burst open and Frost rushed in, face urgent. "Boss, rider coming in fast. Looks like the deputy from Silverton." They found Deputy Carson dismounting in the yard, his horse lathered and clearly pushed hard. He looked worried, which couldn't be good. "Deputy?" Rowan greeted him. "What's the trouble?" "Got word from the Territorial Marshal's office. There's a warrant out for a woman named Alara Grayson, theft of valuable property. Husband's pressing charges through every legal channel he's got." Carson pulled out a folded paper. "I'm supposed to bring her in if I find her." Silence fell over the yard like a hammer. "You find her?" Rowan asked carefully. Carson looked straight at Alara. "That depends. Is there an Alara Grayson here?" "There's an Alara Vance," Rowan said. "Works as my cook. Been here since fall." "Vance, Grayson." Carson rubbed his face tiredly. "Look, I'm not stupid, and I'm not blind, but I also know the Grayson family, know what kind of men they are. Rich bastards who think money means they can do whatever they want to, whoever they want." "Then why are you here?" Alara asked, finding her voice. "Because I took an oath. Because the law is the law, even when it's being used by bad people for bad reasons." He looked at the warrant in his hand, then at Alara. "But the law also says I have to positively identify you, and right now I'm having a real hard time being positive about anything." Understanding dawned. "You're giving me an out. I'm saying I rode out here, asked my questions, and didn't find anyone matching the description. Woman I'm looking for has dark hair. You're clearly," he squinted at her, "blonde. Or maybe red-headed. Hard to say in this light." Despite everything, Alara almost smiled. "I appreciate that, Deputy. Don't appreciate it too much. This buys you time, not freedom. The Graysons have money and lawyers. They'll push until something gives. You need to figure out your next move." "What would you suggest?" Rowan asked. Carson thought for a moment. "Truth. Get ahead of it. The warrant says theft, but if the item was a personal effect from her dead child, that changes things. Judges don't like men who use the law to punish grieving mothers. Get yourself a lawyer, file a counterclaim, make him defend his actions in court instead of hiding behind accusations." "I don't have money for lawyers," Alara said. "Maybe not, but I'm betting this ranch does. And I'm betting everyone standing here would chip in if needed." Carson glanced around at the assembled ranch hands, all of whom were nodding. Sometimes the law works for the little guy. You just have to know how to work it back. After Carson left, officially finding nothing of interest at Ironwood Ranch, the men gathered in the main house. Alara stood awkwardly to one side while they discussed strategy like generals planning a war. "We pool our wages," Frost was saying. "Get her the best lawyer in the territory." "Lawyers cost more than we make in a year," someone else pointed out. "Then we sell cattle early. Take the loss." "Boss can't afford that," Dutch said, surprisingly practical. "Ranch is barely profitable as is." They argued back and forth, voices rising, everyone wanting to help, but nobody sure how. Alara watched them fight over her future and felt something shift inside her chest. These men, most of whom she'd known for just a few months, were willing to sacrifice their livelihoods for her. "Stop," she said quietly. They kept arguing. "Stop!" Louder this time. The room went silent. I can't let you do this. Can't let you bankrupt yourselves or the ranch. It's not. She struggled for words. It's not right. Neither is letting them drag you back to a man who'll hurt you, Tommy said fiercely. He's right, Rowan added. This isn't charity, Alara. This is investment. You're part of this operation now, part of this family. When one of us is in trouble, all of us respond. That's how we survive out here. But what if we lose? What if the judge sides with him anyway? Then you've thrown away everything for nothing. It won't be for nothing, Rowan said firmly. It'll be because we tried, because we stood up, because we didn't just roll over and let rich men do whatever they want. That matters. Alara looked around the room at faces she'd come to know so well. Frost with his steady reliability, Dutch with his rough edges and hidden kindness, Tommy with his earnest loyalty, all of them watching her, waiting. All right, she said finally, but I'm paying you back, every cent, even if it takes the rest of my life. Deal, Rowan said, though they both knew it was a promise she might never be able to keep. The next day, Rowan rode to Silverton and came back with a lawyer. Not the best in the territory. They couldn't afford the best, but a competent man named Samuel Winters who listened to Alara's story with genuine interest. The locket belonged to your daughter? He asked, taking notes. Yes, it was hers. I had it made for her first birthday. My money, from work I did before the marriage. It's the only thing I have left of her. And your husband prevented you from seeking medical care for her? Alara's throat tightened. Yes. Winters wrote that down. That's neglect. Possibly criminal neglect. And the locket being a maternal keepsake from a deceased child, that's powerful. Judges are human. Most of them are fathers. They won't like a man who's using the courts to harass a grieving mother. But will they rule in my favor? Honestly, I don't know. The law is on his side technically. You were married, which means your property was his property under territorial law. But there are exceptions, moral exceptions. Judges have discretion. He looked at her seriously. I can't promise we'll win, but I can promise I'll give it everything I've got. It wasn't the reassurance Alara wanted, but it was honest. She appreciated that. When's the hearing? She asked. 3 weeks. Silverton Courthouse. You'll need to testify. Be prepared for them to attack your character. They'll try to make you look unstable, vindictive, dishonest. Can you handle that? Alara thought about everything she'd survived, everything she'd endured. Yes. Good. Then let's get to work. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Winters came to the ranch multiple times, asking questions, building the case, teaching Alara how to testify without breaking down. It was brutal. He made her recount every detail of her marriage, her daughter's death, her escape, made her relive the worst moments of her life over and over until she could speak about them without crying. I know it's hard, he said during one particularly difficult session, but emotion in the courtroom can work against you. They'll call you hysterical, unreliable. You need to be calm, factual. Let the events speak for themselves. I'm not sure I can do that. You can. I've seen how you handle yourself under pressure. You're stronger than you think. Alara wasn't sure about that, but she kept trying. Meanwhile, life on the ranch continued. The men went about their work with determined normalcy, but there was an undercurrent of tension nobody could quite shake. They were waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Marcus Grayson to make his next move. It came on a Tuesday. Alara was making bread when she heard shouting from outside. Not the usual ranch noise. This was urgent, alarmed. She ran to the window and saw smoke rising from the direction of the north pasture. Fire. She grabbed buckets and ran outside, joining the stream of men rushing toward the flames. By the time she got there, a section of fence was burning, the fire spreading fast through the dry winter grass. Water, Rowan was shouting. Form a line. Don't let it reach the barn. They worked frantically, passing buckets hand to hand, throwing water on the advancing flames. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. Alara's arms screamed with effort, but she kept going, kept hauling water, kept fighting. It took an hour to get the fire under control. By the end, everyone was covered in soot and ash, coughing, exhausted. The fence was destroyed, along with a good section of pasture. But they'd stopped it before it reached any buildings. Frost found the source. Oil-soaked rags stuffed under the fence posts, deliberately set. This was arson, he said, holding up the evidence. Everyone knew who was responsible. There was only one person with motive. Grayson's trying to scare us, Dutch said, spitting into the scorched earth, trying to make us give her up. Is anyone hurt? Rowan asked, ignoring the commentary. A few minor burns, some singed hair, but nothing serious. They'd been lucky. Double the watch, Rowan ordered. 2 men on patrol at all times. And I want someone posted near the main house at night. If they're willing to burn fence, they might try worse. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to footsteps outside. The sound of men patrolling, protecting. Because of her. This was all because of her. She got up and went to the kitchen, finding Rowan already there with a cup of coffee. Can't sleep either? Rowan asked. No. Elara sat down heavily. This has to stop. He's going to hurt someone. Maybe kill someone. All because I won't come back to him. So what do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just leave, disappear. Go somewhere he'll never find me. You think he'd stop if you left? Elara considered that. Probably not. He'd burn this place down out of spite. That's what I think too. Men like him, they don't want you back because they love you. They want you back because you defied them. Because you're proof they don't have absolute control. Rowan took a sip of coffee. Running won't fix that. It'll just make you his obsession forever. So what's the alternative? We finish this. We go to court. We win. We show him he can't bully his way through everything. And if we lose, Rowan met her eyes, then we deal with that when it happens. But we don't give up before we've even fought. 2 days before the hearing, a man arrived at the ranch asking for work. He seemed normal enough, quiet, competent, willing to work for low wages. Rowan hired him on because they needed the help after losing so much fence. His name was Carter. He was good with horses and kept to himself. Should have been perfect. Except Tommy didn't trust him. Something's off about that guy, the young man told Elara while helping wash dishes. Off how? Can't put my finger on it. But he asks too many questions. Wants to know about the layout of the ranch, about who sleeps where, about you. About me? Says he heard we got a new cook. Wants to know where you're from, how long you been here. I didn't tell him nothing, but, Tommy frowned, I think someone sent him. Elara's blood ran cold. You think he's working for Marcus? I think it's possible, she told Rowan, who immediately became wary. They couldn't prove anything. Carter hadn't done anything wrong, but they started watching him more carefully, and they made sure he was never alone near the main house. 3 days later, they caught him trying to break into Elara's room. Dutch and Frost grabbed him before he could run. They dragged him to Rowan's office and shut the door. Elara wasn't there for the conversation, but she heard Carter's raised voice through the walls. I was just looking for the truth, Rowan's voice cut through, cold as ice. Or I let these men do whatever they want with you. A pause. Then Carter started talking. Marcus Grayson had hired him to get information, to find proof that Elara was there, to report back on the ranch's defenses and routines. He was supposed to steal something of Elara's, a piece of clothing, a personal item that could be used as evidence in court. How much did he pay you? Rowan asked. $50? $50 to betray people who gave you work and shelter. Disgust dripped from every word. Get him out of here. If I see him on my land again, I'll shoot him myself. They threw Carter out with nothing but the clothes on his back. He rode off into the winter cold, and nobody felt sorry for him. But the incident rattled everyone. If Marcus was willing to plant spies, willing to commit arson, what else was he capable of? The night before the hearing, Elara sat alone in the kitchen with the locket open in her palm. Lily's face looked up at her, frozen in time, forever 3 years old, forever smiling. I'm trying, she whispered to the tiny portrait. I'm trying so hard to do right by you, to make your life mean something. I don't know if it's working. I don't know if I'm strong enough, but I'm trying. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Tommy in the doorway. Sorry, he said quickly. Didn't mean to interrupt. You're not. She closed the locket carefully. Can't sleep? No. Keep thinking about tomorrow. He came in and sat down across from her. You're going to do great. I know it. How can you possibly know that? Because I've watched you handle everything this place throws at you without breaking. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, even though you don't think you are. He paused. My sister, the one I told you about. She got married to a bad man, too. I was too young to help her, too young to understand what was happening. By the time I figured it out, she was gone, left in the middle of the night, and I never heard from her again. Tommy, I hope she found somewhere like this. Somewhere with people who stood up for her, who fought for her. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. So when I fight for you tomorrow, I'm also fighting for her. For every woman who got dealt a bad hand and deserved better. Alara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we win. Morning came too fast. Alara dressed in her best clothes, which weren't much, just a simple dress she'd borrowed from a neighboring homestead, and tried to calm her racing heart. Rowan had arranged for a wagon to take them to Silverton, along with an escort of ranch hands. Safety in numbers. The courthouse was an imposing building, all stone and authority. Alara felt small walking up its steps, like a child about to be judged for crimes she didn't fully understand. Inside, the courtroom was already filling up. She saw Marcus immediately, sitting at the plaintiff's table with two expensive-looking lawyers. He smiled when he saw her, cold and triumphant, like he'd already won. Beside him sat her husband. Alara's legs nearly gave out. She hadn't seen James Grayson in months, had hoped she'd never have to see him again. But there he was, handsome and well-dressed and radiating the kind of confidence that came from always getting what you wanted. He stared at her with an expression she knew too well. Ownership, possession, the look that said she belonged to him and always would. Rowan's hand on her elbow steadied her. Don't look at him. Look at me. She forced her eyes away from James and focused on Rowan's face, solid, real, safe. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. You've survived worse than him. A courtroom is nothing compared to what you've already lived through. The judge entered, an older man with gray hair and a stern expression. Everyone stood. The proceedings began. Samuel Winters presented their case first, laying out the facts methodically. The locket was a gift from mother to child. The child had died due to her father's neglect. The mother had taken the only keepsake she had of her daughter when fleeing an abusive marriage. This wasn't theft. It was a mother protecting her child's memory. The Grayson lawyers countered with property law, marriage statutes, legal precedent. They painted Alara as unstable, vindictive, a woman who'd abandoned her lawful husband and stolen valuable property out of spite. Then came the testimony. James took the stand first, smooth and practiced. He claimed Alara had always been difficult, emotional, prone to exaggeration. He said he'd loved their daughter deeply, had done everything possible to save her, but sometimes illness couldn't be fought. He made Lily's death sound like a tragedy they'd shared, not a crime he'd committed. Alara's hands clenched in her lap. Every word out of his mouth was a lie, but he told those lies with such conviction that people believed him. She could see it in their faces. Then it was her turn. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs and placed her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. The whole truth. Winters started gently, asking about her marriage, about Lily, about the events leading to her daughter's death. Alara kept her voice steady, reciting facts without emotion like he'd taught her. Then the Grayson lawyers got their turn. Mrs. Grayson, the lead attorney began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You claim your husband was abusive. Can you provide any evidence of this abuse? I have scars. Scars can come from anywhere. Do you have witnesses, police reports, medical documentation? No, he was careful, and I was too afraid to tell anyone. How convenient. So we're supposed to take your word for it. Yes. And this locket, you claim it was purchased with your own money. Do you have receipts, bank records? Anything to prove that claim? No, it was years ago. I didn't keep... So again, we're supposed to simply believe you. The lawyer turned to the jury. A woman with no evidence, no witnesses, no proof of anything she claims. Just stories designed to make her theft seem justified. Alara's throat tightened. This was exactly what Winters had warned her about. My daughter died because he wouldn't get her help, she said, her voice rising despite herself. She was burning with fever, and he said doctors cost too much money, even though he spent more than that on whiskey every single week. She died because he valued money more than her life. And the locket was all I had left of her. The only thing. I wasn't going to let him sell it or give it away, like it meant nothing. Your Honor, the Grayson lawyer said smoothly, the witness is becoming emotional and unresponsive. I'm answering your questions, Alara shot back. The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Grayson, please control yourself. She took a breath, forced calm. But inside she was screaming. The questioning continued, brutal and relentless. They attacked every aspect of her story, looking for contradictions. By the time she stepped down, she felt hollowed out, broken. But Winters had one more card to play. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness, Deputy Carson from Silverton. Carson took the stand and told the truth about the Grayson family, about their reputation for using money and influence to avoid consequences, about complaints filed and mysteriously dropped, about women who'd worked for them and left abruptly, too afraid to say why. Objection, the Grayson lawyer shouted. This is hearsay and character assassination. It's establishing pattern of behavior, Winters countered. The judge considered. I'll allow it, but keep it relevant, counselor. Carson continued, painting a picture of a family that believed they were above the law. It wasn't proof of what James had done to Alara specifically, but it gave context, made her story more believable. When Carson stepped down, both sides rested their cases. The judge called a recess to deliberate. Alara stood in the courthouse hallway, surrounded by ranch hands who'd come to support her and tried not to fall apart. Rowan stayed close, a silent presence that kept her grounded. Whatever happens, Rowan said quietly, we're leaving here together. You can't promise that. Watch me. 2 hours later, they were called back in. The judge sat behind his bench, expression unreadable. The courtroom fell silent. I've considered both arguments carefully, he began. This is not a simple case. The law is clear about property rights within marriage. Under normal circumstances, Mrs. Grayson would be guilty of theft. Alara's heart sank. However, the judge continued, these are not normal circumstances. The item in question is not a piece of furniture or livestock. It's a mother's keepsake of her deceased child. And while I cannot prove the allegations of abuse and neglect, I find Mrs. Grayson's testimony credible. I've seen enough of these cases to recognize truth when I hear it. Hope flickered. Furthermore, Mr. Grayson's pursuit of this case strikes me as vindictive rather than just. A man who truly cared about recovering stolen property would have filed a claim for its value, not demanded the return of a specific item with purely sentimental worth. James's face was turning red. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the defendant. The locket is hereby declared Mrs. Grayson's personal property, exempt from marital property law due to its nature as a maternal keepsake. All charges are dismissed. The gavel came down. Furthermore, I'm granting Mrs. Grayson a legal separation from James Grayson, effective immediately. She is free to resume her maiden name and is not obligated to return to the marriage. This case is closed. The courtroom erupted. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard. Free. She was free. Rowan pulled her into a fierce hug, which was so unlike the rancher that it shocked her into tears. Happy tears this time. Relief and joy and disbelief all tangled together. The ranch hands were cheering, slapping each other on the back. Tommy was grinning so wide his face looked like it might split. Across the courtroom, James was shouting at his lawyers, his face purple with rage. Marcus looked equally furious, but there was nothing they could do. The judge had ruled. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Winters shook her hand. Congratulations, Miss Vance. Vance? Not Grayson. Never Grayson again. Thank you, she said, and meant it with everything she had. The ride back to the ranch was jubilant. The men sang drinking songs and told jokes and passed around a bottle in celebration. Alara sat between Rowan and Tommy, listening to their joy, feeling lighter than she had in years. When Ironwood Ranch came into view, home, she realized with a start, it was home. She felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope, not just for survival anymore, but for a real life, a real future. Here, with these people who'd fought for her when they didn't have to. That night, the whole ranch gathered for a celebratory dinner. Alara cooked her heart out, making everything good she could think of. The men ate and drank and laughed, the tension of the past weeks finally breaking. Dutch raised his glass. To Miss Vance, the stubbornest woman in the territory and the best cook we've ever had. To Miss Vance, everyone chorused. She stood there surrounded by rough men and rough affection and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She'd been so afraid of belonging, afraid that caring would lead to loss. But maybe loss was inevitable. Maybe caring anyway was what made you human. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. All of you. For everything. You earned it, Rowan said simply. And for the first time, Alara believed that might be true. The euphoria of victory lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning, Alara woke to find frost patterns on her window and an unfamiliar heaviness in her chest. Free, the judge had said. But freedom turned out to be more complicated than a gavel strike and a piece of paper. She went through her morning routine, lighting fires, starting coffee, pulling out ingredients for breakfast, but her hands felt clumsy, disconnected from her brain. She'd won. She should be happy. So why did she feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall? Rowan found her staring at a pot of oatmeal she'd apparently been stirring for 10 minutes straight. You all right? Alara blinked. Yes. No, I don't know. That's honest, at least. Rowan took the spoon from her hand and set it aside. What's going on? I thought winning would feel different, like something would change inside me, like I'd suddenly know what to do next. She laughed, but it came out brittle. Instead, I just feel empty. You've been running on fear and adrenaline for months, maybe years. Now that the immediate threat's gone, your body doesn't know what to do with itself. Is that normal? I don't know about normal, but it's human. Rowan poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. Give yourself time. You don't have to figure everything out today. But time felt like a luxury Alara couldn't afford. She'd lived so long in survival mode that sitting still felt dangerous. Like if she stopped moving, stopped being useful, everything would fall apart. The men noticed the shift in her too. She saw it in the way they watched her when they thought she wasn't looking, concerned, uncertain. Like they'd won the battle, but didn't know how to help her through what came after. Tommy tried to cheer her up by bringing wildflowers to the kitchen. Dutch offered to teach her to shoot, in case those Grayson bastards come back. Frost just sat with her sometimes in companionable silence, which helped more than words. But it was a conversation with Cole, still recovering from his broken leg, that actually cracked something open. She'd brought him dinner in the bunkhouse, finding him propped up on pillows, reading a battered book. How's the leg? She asked. Itches like hell. Doc says that means it's healing. He set the book aside. How are you? Fine. That's a lie. You've been fine for 3 days now, and everyone can tell you're not. Alara sat down on the edge of his cot, suddenly tired of pretending. I don't know how to be free. That sounds stupid, but it's true. I've spent so long being afraid, being careful, being ready to run that I don't know how to just exist. Without looking over my shoulder, Cole nodded slowly. When I broke my leg, the pain was bad. Real bad. But you know what was worse? When the pain finally stopped. Because then I didn't have anything to focus on except all the things I couldn't do anymore. All the ways I'd changed. How did you handle it? Badly at first. Asked myself a lot of questions that didn't have good answers. But then I figured out I didn't need to know everything all at once. I just needed to know what came next. One small thing, then another. Eventually, those small things add up to something that looks like a life. What's your next small thing? Walking without a limp? Probably won't manage it, but I'm going to try anyway. He smiled. What's yours? Alara thought about that. I don't know. Maybe just getting through today without falling apart. Sounds like a good place to start. That conversation stayed with her. She started looking for small things. Making bread without her hands shaking, sleeping through the night without nightmares, going a whole day without touching the locket for reassurance. Slowly, incrementally, things got easier. 2 weeks after the trial, a neighboring homesteader named Margaret Shaw rode up to the ranch asking if Alara could help with a difficult birth. Not a human birth, a calf having trouble coming into the world, but Margaret had heard Alara had steady hands and a calm head. I know you're a cook, not a midwife, Margaret said apologetically. But my husband's away trading cattle, and I can't do this alone. Alara had never birthed anything in her life, but she heard herself saying yes anyway. They worked for hours in Margaret's barn, Alara following instructions, trying not to panic. The cow was in distress, the calf stuck wrong, and for a terrible moment she was sure they'd lose them both. But then Margaret talked her through repositioning, and Alara's hands, somehow steady despite her fear, found the right angle, and suddenly there was a wet, gangly creature sliding into the hay. The calf took a shuddering breath and lived. Margaret laughed with relief and exhaustion. You're a natural. I'm really not. Maybe, but you showed up and you didn't quit. That counts for something. Riding back to Ironwood, Alara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the simple satisfaction of having helped, of being needed for something beyond cooking. Word spread. The next week, another neighbor asked if she could help preserve vegetables. Then someone needed advice on treating a sick child. Alara didn't know medicine, but she knew enough home remedies to offer suggestions. Then a young woman from a nearby homestead showed up asking if Alara could teach her to cook. My husband says I burn water, the woman said with embarrassed humor. I'm hopeless. Alara started giving her lessons twice a week. It turned out she was good at teaching, patient in a way she'd never been with herself. The woman, whose name was Sarah, gradually improved. More importantly, she started talking about her marriage, about feeling inadequate, about the crushing isolation of frontier life. Alara listened and recognized herself in those words. The person she'd been before Ironwood. You're not hopeless, she told Sarah one afternoon. You just never had anyone teach you properly. There's a difference. My mother tried. I didn't listen. Then you weren't ready. Now you are. That's what matters. Sarah looked at her with something like wonder. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I just made enough mistakes to recognize them in other people. But the question stuck with her. When had she become someone others came to for help? When had she stopped being the woman who ran and started being the woman who stood? She didn't have an answer, but the shift had happened anyway. Winter began to release its grip. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth underneath. The days grew longer. The men started talking about spring work, repairing fences, moving cattle to higher pastures, all the endless tasks that came with ranching. Rowan pulled Alara aside one evening after dinner. I meant what I said before, about staying permanently. Offer still stands. Alara had been expecting this conversation, but still wasn't ready for it. I know. You don't sound certain. I'm not. I'm grateful, more grateful than I can say, but I don't know if staying is fair to you, to any of you. Fair how? What if James comes back? What if he brings trouble despite the court ruling? What if... Alara, Rowan's voice was gentle but firm. You can't live your life preparing for what-ifs. Sometimes you just have to decide what you want and reach for it, despite the risk. What if I don't know what I want? Then figure it out, but do it here, where you're safe, where you've got people who care about you. That night, Alara opened the locket for the first time in days. Lily's face looked back at her, forever young, forever smiling. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I want to stay, but I'm scared that wanting things leads to losing them. I lost you. I can't lose this too. The portrait didn't answer, of course, but staring at her daughter's face, Alara realized something. Lily would have wanted her to live, really live, not just survive. Would have wanted her to take chances and build a life and let herself be happy. She'd been honoring Lily's memory by keeping her grief fresh, but maybe the better way to honor her was by choosing joy when it was offered. The decision crystallized slowly over the next few days. She watched the ranch hands joke and argue and work together, watched Tommy's easy laughter, watched Rowan manage everything with quiet competence, watched the sun set over land that felt increasingly like home. She made her choice. I want to stay, she told Rowan one morning, while they were both up early, sharing coffee in the pre-dawn quiet. Rowan didn't look surprised. Good. I'll draw up proper employment papers. Make it official. There's something else. What? I want to expand this kitchen. Start cooking for the neighboring homesteads, too. Not as a business exactly, but as a service. A lot of families out here are struggling. A few prepared meals each week might make the difference between making it and giving up. Rowan considered this. That's a lot of extra work. I know, but I need purpose beyond just feeding the same 20 people every day. I need to feel like I'm building something. Contributing something bigger than myself. All right, but you'll need help. Can't do it alone. Sarah wants to learn, and I'm betting there are other women who'd be interested. We could teach each other, share the load. Community kitchen. Rowan smiled slightly. I like it. Make it happen. Word spread quickly. Within 2 weeks, Alara had 4 women coming regularly to cook and learn. Sarah, Margaret, a quiet widow named Ruth, and a young mother named Catherine with 3 small children. They'd cook in bulk, then distribute meals to families who needed them. The first day of operation was chaotic. 5 women in one kitchen, all with different skill levels and different ideas about how things should be done. There were arguments about seasoning, near disasters with burned bread, and one spectacular incident involving an overturned pot of soup. But there was also laughter, real laughter, the kind that came from shared struggle and genuine connection. "This is wonderful," Catherine said, flower in her hair and joy on her face. "I haven't talked to another woman in months. I was starting to forget how." Ruth nodded. "Isolation makes you strange, makes you forget you're human." "Then we make sure none of us forgets," Alara said. "This kitchen is open to anyone who needs it, food or company or both." The community kitchen became the heart of something larger. Women started gathering even when they weren't cooking, bringing their children, sharing news and gossip and support. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of all the female energy invading their space, gradually accepted it. Some even seemed to enjoy it. Dutch surprised everyone by volunteering to build extra shelving for supplies. Tommy started playing with Catherine's children, chasing them around the yard while they shrieked with laughter. Frost helped Margaret repair her wagon so she could haul supplies more easily. The ranch was transforming from a collection of isolated individuals into something that resembled a community. And Alara found herself at the center of it, not by design but by necessity. One afternoon, she was teaching Sarah how to make stew when a commotion erupted outside. Alara looked out the window and saw an unfamiliar wagon pulling up, fancy, expensive-looking, completely out of place. Her heart kicked into her throat. Grayson. It had to be. But when the passenger stepped down, it wasn't James or Marcus. It was a woman Alara had never seen before, well-dressed, probably in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an aristocratic bearing. She looked around the ranch with evident distaste, then marched toward the main house. Rowan intercepted her on the porch. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Alara Grayson. I was told she works here." "There's no one here by that name." "Don't play games with me. I know she's here." The woman's voice was cultured, educated, used to being obeyed. "I'm Elizabeth Grayson, James's mother, and I need to speak with my daughter-in-law immediately." Alara's stomach dropped. She stepped out onto the porch before Rowan could send the woman away. "I'm Alara Vance, not Grayson. The court dissolved that connection." Elizabeth's eyes raked over her, assessing. "You look terrible. Thin, worn out, working in a kitchen like a common servant." "I am a common servant, and I'm happier than I ever was in your son's house." "That's what I need to talk to you about." Elizabeth glanced at Rowan. "Privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Rowan." Elizabeth's mouth thinned, but she nodded. "Fine, I came to apologize." Silence fell like a hammer. "I'm sorry?" Alara said, certain she'd misheard. "I said I came to apologize. For my son. For what he did to you. For what he did to your daughter." Elizabeth's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "I didn't know. About the abuse. About his refusal to get Lily medical care. He hid it well. By the time I learned the truth, you were already gone." "How did you learn?" "The trial. I attended, though you probably didn't notice me in the back. I heard your testimony, heard the deputy's testimony about my family's reputation." Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly. "I've spent the last 2 weeks investigating, talking to former servants, former business associates, building a picture of who my son really is, and I'm horrified." Alara didn't know what to say, didn't know if she could trust this. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Elizabeth continued. "I don't deserve it. I raised him. Whatever he became, that's partially my responsibility. But I wanted you to know he won't bother you again. I've cut him off financially, removed him from the family business. He has no resources to pursue you anymore." "You did that for me. I did it because it was right. Because my granddaughter died because of his negligence, and that's unforgivable." Elizabeth pulled an envelope from her bag. "This is for you. Money. Not charity, it's from Lily's trust fund. Money that was set aside for her future. Since she doesn't have a future, it should go to you, to help you build whatever life you want." Alara took the envelope with numb fingers. She opened it and saw a bank draft for an amount that made her vision blur. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, and you will, because you've earned it through suffering I can barely imagine. Use it however you want. Stay here, leave here, build something, tear something down. It's yours. Elizabeth turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you were right to run, and I'm sorry no one in my family gave you a reason to stay. She climbed back into her wagon and left, leaving Alara standing on the porch holding more money than she knew what to do with. Rowan looked at the bank draft over Alara's shoulder and whistled low. That's a fortune. What am I supposed to do with this? Whatever you want. That's what she said, isn't it? Alara stared at the numbers, her mind spinning. She could leave, could go anywhere, do anything, could start completely fresh somewhere no one knew her story. But as she looked around the ranch, at the kitchen where women were laughing, at the yard where Tommy was teaching children to rope fence posts, at the land that had become home, she realized she didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay, and now she had the means to do it properly. That evening, she called a meeting with Rowan and the core ranch hands, Frost, Dutch, Tommy, and a few others. I want to invest in the ranch, she said without preamble. Become a partner, not just the cook, but someone with actual stake in making this place work. Rowan's eyebrows rose. That's a big commitment. I know, but I'm ready to make it. This place saved my life. I want to help it thrive. The ranch barely breaks even most years, could lose money, could fail completely, could succeed too, especially if we expand operations. We've got land we're not using, water rights worth developing, and with the community kitchen already operating, we could build a reputation for hospitality that brings in business. Dutch leaned forward. You've been thinking about this. For weeks. I just didn't have the means to do anything about it until today. Rowan studied her for a long moment. If we do this, if we become partners, things change. You're not just an employee anymore. You're invested, responsible. Can't walk away easily if things get hard. I don't want to walk away, that's the point. All right then, Rowan extended a hand. Partners. Alara shook it, feeling the calluses on Rowan's palm, the strength in those fingers. It felt like sealing a promise, a commitment to the future instead of running from the past. The men broke into applause and congratulations. Tommy hugged her impulsively, lifting her off her feet despite her protests. Even Dutch cracked a rare, genuine smile. That night, alone in her room, Alara opened the locket one more time. I'm staying, baby girl, she whispered to Lily's portrait. I'm planting roots, building something real. I hope that's okay. I hope you'd be proud. She closed the locket gently and, for the first time, put it in a drawer instead of wearing it against her skin. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but letting it rest, letting herself rest. The nightmares that had plagued her for months began to fade, not disappearing entirely, she didn't think they ever would, but losing their sharp edges. She started sleeping through the night, started waking up without dread. The transformation wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was gradual, built from hundreds of small moments. Morning coffee with Rowan, discussing ranch business as equals, teaching Sarah and the other women new recipes, and watching their confidence grow. Riding out to check on neighboring homesteads, bringing food and companionship to isolated families. One afternoon, Margaret pulled her aside after a cooking session. You know what you've done here, don't you? Margaret said. Made a lot of stew? You've reminded people what community feels like. Before you came, everyone was just surviving alone. Now we're actually living together, supporting each other. That matters more than you know. Alara didn't have words for how that made her feel. Valued, maybe. Needed in a way that felt healthy instead of suffocating. She was learning the difference between being needed because someone wanted to control you and being needed because you had something genuine to offer. The first was prison, the second was purpose. Spring came fully, turning the brown landscape green. Calves were born. Fences were repaired. The ranch buzzed with activity and hope. And through it all, Alara found herself settling into her new role. Not just cook, but partner, teacher, friend, community builder. She was becoming someone she'd never imagined she could be. Someone whole. The scars were still there. The grief over Lily would never fully heal. But she was learning to carry those wounds without letting them define her. Learning that survival could transform into something more than just not dying. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant orange and gold, Rowan found her sitting on the porch, watching the colors spread across the sky. "Penny for your thoughts," Rowan said, "just thinking about how different everything is from 6 months ago, how different I am." "You're not that different. You were always strong. You just didn't have room to show it before." "Maybe." Alara paused. "Thank you for everything. For taking a chance on a half-dead stranger. For standing up for me when you didn't have to. For making me believe I deserved better." "You did that yourself. I just gave you space to do it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day end and the stars begin to emerge. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Closer by, she could hear Tommy and some of the younger hands laughing over something. Home, Alara thought. This is home. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that thought didn't terrify her. It felt like a promise she could actually keep. Summer arrived with a vengeance, bringing heat that shimmered off the flats and turned the sky white by midday. The ranch thrived despite the harsh conditions, or maybe because of them. There was something about surviving difficulty together that forged people into something stronger than they'd been alone. Alara's partnership with Rowan became official in late June. They signed papers in Silverton, witnessed by Samuel Winters, who seemed genuinely pleased to see her building a life instead of just escaping one. "You've come a long way," he told her as they left the courthouse. "So have you, from defending desperate women to witnessing business deals." He laughed. The desperate woman became the businesswoman. That's progress. The partnership changed things in subtle ways. The men started coming to her with ideas and concerns, not just Rowan. She had input on decisions about cattle sales, equipment purchases, hiring. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I don't know anything about running a ranch," she confessed to Rowan one night while going over the books. "Neither did I when I started. You learn by doing, by making mistakes and fixing them." "What if I make a mistake we can't fix? Then we deal with it together." That's what partners do. The community kitchen continued to grow. What had started as 5 women cooking for struggling families became something larger, a gathering place, a support network, a lifeline for people spread across miles of isolated frontier. Women brought their problems along with their recipes. Alara found herself mediating disputes, offering advice, listening to stories that reminded her of her own. One afternoon, a young woman named Anna showed up with a black eye and a broken rib, claiming she'd fallen. Alara recognized that lie. She'd told it herself countless times. She pulled Anna aside, away from the others. "Who hit you?" "I told you I felt—" "Anna, I know what falling looks like. This isn't it." The girl's composure crumbled. "My husband, but it's not. He's under a lot of pressure. The homestead's failing. He's drinking more. He doesn't mean it." Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach. These were the same excuses she'd made for James, the same rationalizations that had kept her trapped. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, taking Anna's hands. "It doesn't matter if he's under pressure. It doesn't matter if he's drinking. Nothing, and I mean nothing, gives him the right to put hands on you. You understand? But I have nowhere to go." "Yes, you do. You can stay here. We'll make room. You'll be safe. He'll come looking for me." "Let him. He'll find me and Rowan and 20 ranch hands who don't take kindly to men who beat their wives. We'll handle him." Anna stayed. Her husband did come looking 3 days later, drunk and belligerent. He found himself facing Rowan, Dutch, and Frost, all armed, all utterly unimpressed by his threats. "Your wife's not coming back," Rowan said flatly. "You want to contest that? We can settle it right now. Or you can ride away and count yourself lucky we're letting you leave in one piece." The man chose survival over pride. He rode off cursing, but he rode off. Anna cried that night, relief and fear and grief all tangled together. Alara sat with her, not offering platitudes or false comfort, just presence. "What do I do now?" Anna asked. "Whatever you want. You're free. That's terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. But you get to choose." "I don't know how to choose." "Then start small. What do you want for dinner?" Anna laughed through her tears. "That's such a small thing." "All big things are made of small things. You build a life one choice at a time." Word spread about what happened. Other women started showing up, some escaping bad situations, others just desperate for community. The ranch became an unofficial refuge, a place where women could catch their breath and figure out their next steps. Not everyone stayed. Some moved on to family in other territories. Some found work elsewhere. But everyone who came through left different than they'd arrived, stronger, more certain of their worth. Rowan worried about the strain on resources. We're not a charity operation. We can't feed everyone who shows up. We're not feeding everyone. We're feeding people who need help. There's a difference. The difference being what exactly? Alara thought about that. The difference is that we're not just giving them food, we're giving them space to heal, to remember they're human. That's worth more than money. Pretty words, but pretty words don't pay bills. Then we make it pay. We expand the garden, start selling preserved foods in town, use the kitchen as a teaching facility, charge for lessons, turn necessity into opportunity. Rowan considered this. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things. They expanded gradually, carefully. The garden grew to 3 times its original size. Women who stayed at the ranch worked in exchange for room and board, learning skills they could take with them. The teaching kitchen started bringing in actual income, not much, but enough to offset costs. By midsummer, the ranch was running better than it had in years. Cattle prices were good. The garden was producing. The community kitchen had a waiting list for lessons. It should have felt perfect, but Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, some last piece of unfinished business. She was right. In late July, Deputy Carson rode up with news. James Grayson was dead. Alara heard the words but couldn't process them. What? Found dead in his study 3 days ago. Looks like he drank himself to death. Not all at once, just gradually over months. His liver finally gave out. She sat down heavily. Dead. James was dead. You all right? Carson asked. I don't know. I should feel something, shouldn't I? Relief, grief, satisfaction. But I just feel empty. That's normal. You spent years being terrified of him. Now that threat's gone and your brain doesn't know how to process it. After Carson left, Alara went to her room and opened the drawer where she'd put the locket. She looked at Lily's face for a long time, trying to feel something about James's death. Nothing came. Maybe that was the ultimate victory. That he'd become irrelevant to her. That his death changed nothing because she'd already moved on, built a life he couldn't touch. That night at dinner, she didn't mention the news. It didn't feel worth sharing. James Grayson had taken up enough space in her story. She wouldn't give him any more. Instead, she listened to the men talk about the upcoming cattle drive, about fence repairs needed before winter, about Tommy's increasingly serious courtship of Sarah from the cooking lessons. You gonna marry that girl? Dutch asked Tommy, who turned bright red. Maybe, if she'll have me. She'd be crazy not to, Alara said. You're a good man, Tommy. Thanks to you. You taught me that treating people decent isn't weakness. I didn't teach you that. You already knew it. You just needed permission to believe it mattered. After dinner, Rowan found her in the kitchen doing dishes. You're quiet tonight. Just thinking. About what? About how strange life is. A year ago, I was half dead in the desert. Now I'm a ranch partner with more family than I know what to do with. It doesn't seem real sometimes. It's real. You made it real by showing up every day and doing the work. Is it always this hard? The work of building a life? Usually harder, but you're doing it with people who care about you. That makes all the difference. Alara set down the dish she'd been washing. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why did you help me? Really? You could have left me in the desert. Could have turned me away when Marcus came. Could have let the Graysons have me. Why didn't you? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. You want the honest answer? Always. Because when I saw you collapsed out there with nothing but a skillet and more guts than sense, I saw myself. 20 years ago, I was running too. Different circumstances, same desperation. Someone gave me a chance when they didn't have to. Taught me that survival doesn't have to be a solo act. Rowan paused. I helped you because someone helped me once, and because I recognized strength when I saw it, even when you couldn't see it yourself. What were you running from? A life that didn't fit. Expectations I couldn't meet. People who wanted me to be something I wasn't. Rowan smiled slightly. Not as dramatic as your story, but it felt life or death at the time. Turns out leaving was the best decision I ever made. Do you regret it? The life you left behind? Not for a second. This place, these people, this is real. Everything before was just performance. Alara understood that deeply. She'd spent so many years performing the role of dutiful wife, hiding her true self, trying to be small enough to avoid notice. Coming to Ironwood had let her stop performing and start existing. August brought the cattle drive. Most of the men left for 2 weeks, leaving the ranch skeleton crewed. Alara found herself managing operations with Rowan, making decisions she'd never have trusted herself with months before. A fence broke during a storm. She organized the repair crew. A buyer showed up early for cattle. She negotiated a fair price and closed the deal. A dispute broke out between 2 of the temporary hands. She mediated and resolved it before it escalated. When Rowan complimented her on handling everything, Alara shrugged. I just did what needed doing. That's leadership, seeing what needs doing and making it happen. I'm not a leader. Yes, you are. You just don't recognize it yet. The men returned from the cattle drive tired and successful. They'd gotten good prices, made valuable contacts, set up future deals. Tommy came back with a ring he'd bought in town, planning to propose to Sarah, he admitted shyly to Alara. You should do it at the harvest dinner, Alara suggested. Make it special. The harvest dinner had become a tradition, a community gathering at the end of summer where everyone brought food and celebrated surviving another season. This year would be the biggest yet, with families coming from homesteads 20 miles in every direction. Alara spent days preparing, coordinating with the other women, planning dishes that would feed a crowd. The anticipation built like a physical thing, excitement mixing with anxiety about pulling off something this large. The day arrived clear and beautiful, the kind of late summer day that made you forget how brutal winter could be. People started showing up mid-afternoon, wagons loaded with food and children and instruments for music later. The long tables in the yard filled with dishes, roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables from everyone's gardens, pies and cakes and preserves. It was abundance and community made visible, proof that isolated people could create something beautiful together. Tommy proposed to Sarah just before dinner, getting down on one knee in front of everyone. She said yes, crying and laughing, and the crowd erupted in cheers. It was joy in its purest form, simple and real and contagious. During dinner, Rowan stood and raised a glass. I want to say something. A year ago, this ranch was barely surviving. We were a collection of individuals working the same land but not really together. Then Alara Vance collapsed in our yard with nothing but a skillet and changed everything. Alara's face heated. She hated being the center of attention. She didn't just cook for us, Rowan continued. She reminded us what it means to be human, to care about each other, to build community instead of just enduring isolation. This gathering, all of you being here together, this is because of her, because she believed we could be more than we were. Here's to Alara, someone shouted. The crowd echoed it, raising glasses and cheering. Alara wanted to disappear under the table. Instead, she stood up, forcing herself to accept the recognition. I didn't do this alone, she said. Every woman who cooks in that kitchen, every person who helped their neighbor, every one of you who showed up today, you built this. I just started it. You made it real. More cheers, then Margaret stood up. I want to say something too. Before Alara came, I thought I was going crazy from loneliness. My husband's gone trading most of the year. My nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. I'd go weeks without seeing another soul. I started talking to my chickens like they were people. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Then Alara started the community kitchen. Suddenly I had a reason to leave the homestead, had people to talk to, had friends. She saved my sanity, probably my life. Other voices joined in, sharing similar stories. The widow who'd been suicidal until she found purpose teaching cooking. The young mother who'd felt like a failure until other women showed her she wasn't alone. The teenage girl who'd learned she could have ambitions beyond marriage because she'd seen women running businesses. Alara listened to story after story of lives touched, connections made, hope restored. She'd known intellectually that the kitchen mattered, but hearing it articulated, seeing the evidence of community gathered in one place, hit differently. She'd built this. Not alone, but she'd been the catalyst. The woman who'd arrived with nothing had created something that touched dozens of lives. After dinner came music and dancing. Alara found herself pulled into the circle, spinning and laughing with people who felt like family. At some point, Rowan caught her hand and they danced together, nothing romantic, just 2 partners celebrating success. This is what you needed to see, Rowan said. What? Proof that you matter. that your life has value beyond survival, that you're not just the woman who ran, you're the woman who built. Elara felt tears prick her eyes. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, I just pay attention. As the evening wound down and families started heading home, Anna approached Elara. The young woman who'd arrived with a black eye now stood straight and confident, her bruises long healed. I'm leaving tomorrow, Anna said. Alara's heart sank. Where are you going? West. To stay with my aunt in California. She's offered me work in her shop. Anna smiled. I'm ready. You helped me get ready. I didn't do anything. You showed me I deserved better, that being hit wasn't my fault, that I could choose a different life. Anna hugged her fiercely. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything. Watching Anna ride away the next morning, Elara felt bittersweet pride. She'd helped someone escape, helped them heal, helped them find courage to start over. It was what she'd needed once, what she'd found here at Ironwood. The cycle continuing, strength passing from person to person, building something larger than any individual. Fall arrived with its usual spectacular color show. The ranch prepared for winter, stockpiling supplies, repairing buildings, moving cattle to lower pastures. The community kitchen shifted to preservation mode, putting up vegetables and meat for the lean months ahead. Tommy and Sarah got married in October, a simple ceremony at the ranch with everyone they cared about present. Elara made the wedding dinner, pouring love into every dish. Watching the young couple exchange vows, she thought about how far they'd all come. Tommy had arrived as a boy and grown into a man. Sarah had arrived broken and found her strength. Love hadn't saved them. They'd saved themselves. Love had just made the saving sweeter. One evening in late November, Elara found herself alone in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. She pulled out the locket and opened it, looking at Lily's face. I wish you could see this, she whispered. Wish you could see what I built. Wish you could be part of it. But Lily couldn't. Lily was gone, frozen forever at 3 years old, a presence carried in memory and grief. And maybe that was okay. Elara closed the locket and made a decision. She walked outside to where Rowan kept a small flower garden, the only purely decorative thing on the whole ranch. She dug a small hole and buried the locket there, marking the spot with a stone. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but releasing. Letting Lily rest instead of carrying her like a weight around her neck. I love you, she said to the buried locket, to her daughter's memory, to the life she'd lost. I'll always love you. But I have to keep living. I have to let myself be happy. I hope you understand. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the promise of winter. Elara stood there until her fingers went numb, saying goodbye to the woman she'd been. The woman who'd run, who'd survived, who'd been defined by loss and fear. She was someone different now, someone who built instead of fled, someone who helped instead of hid. Someone who'd learned that strength wasn't about not breaking, it was about breaking and healing and choosing to keep going anyway. She went back inside where it was warm, where people who loved her were sleeping, where tomorrow would bring work and challenges and small joys, where she belonged. Winter hit hard that year, but they were ready. The community they'd built meant no one went hungry or froze alone. When one family's roof caved under snow, men from 3 homesteads showed up to help repair it. When someone got sick, the women rallied to care for them. When supplies ran low, people shared what they had. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still hardships, still moments when survival felt uncertain, but they faced it together. One snowy evening, Rowan and Elara sat going over the books. The numbers were good, better than good. The ranch was actually profitable. We could expand, Rowan said, buy more land, increase the herd. Or we could stay this size and focus on quality over quantity, build a reputation for being the best instead of the biggest. Is that what you want? Elara thought about it. I want to build something sustainable, something that lasts, not because it's huge, but because it's strong, like you. She smiled. Like all of us. They worked in comfortable silence, partners in every sense of the word. Not romantic, neither of them wanted that, but bound by shared purpose and genuine respect. Eventually, Rowan asked, Do you ever regret it? Coming here? Staying? Not once. This is the first place I've ever felt like myself, like I didn't have to apologize for existing. Good, because I can't imagine this place without you anymore. You're part of its foundation. So are you. We all are. That's what makes it work. Spring came again, completing the cycle. New calves were born. Gardens were planted. The community kitchen reopened for the season. And on a warm April morning, exactly 1 year after she'd made partner, Alara stood on the porch watching the sunrise and felt something she'd stopped believing was possible. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, not perfect happiness, but the deep certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. She'd arrived at Ironwood Ranch with nothing. No money, no plan, no hope, just a skillet and survival instinct and wounds too deep to measure. Now she had a home, had family, not by blood, but by choice, which somehow mattered more. Had purpose and community and a future she'd built with her own hands. The journey from there to here had been brutal, had required more strength than she'd known she possessed, had broken her down and forced her to rebuild from nothing. But standing here now, watching the sun paint the sky gold, Alara understood something fundamental about human resilience. You could survive the unsurvivable, could take the worst life threw at you and transform it into something beautiful, could choose to be more than your trauma. It wouldn't be easy. The scars would always be there. Some days would be harder than others. But she'd learned that surviving wasn't the same as living, and living required courage she'd had to discover one day at a time. Tommy emerged from the bunkhouse, heading toward the barn for morning chores. He saw her and waved. "Beautiful morning," he called. "Best one yet," she called back. And she meant it. Every morning was the best one yet, because every morning she woke up free. Free to choose, free to build, free to be fully, completely herself without fear or apology. That was worth more than all the money in the world. The kitchen needed starting. Breakfast wouldn't cook itself. There was work to be done, always work to be done. But it was good work, meaningful work, work that mattered. Alara Vance had learned the hard way that you couldn't outrun your past, but you could choose your future, could take the broken pieces of who you'd been and forge them into someone stronger. She was living proof that even in the harshest conditions, with nothing but determination and community, people could not just survive but thrive. She'd come to Ironwood Ranch carrying nothing but a skillet and a past she couldn't speak of. She'd built a life anyway, messy and imperfect and real, and that life had saved her just as much as she'd saved it. Some stories don't have neat endings. Life keeps going, messy and complicated, full of small victories and everyday challenges. But this story, Alara's story, had reached a place of resolution, not because all problems were solved, but because she'd finally learned the most important lesson. She was enough, had always been enough, deserved the life she was building. The woman who'd collapsed in the desert, certain she was dying, had become the woman who fed an entire community, who offered refuge to the broken, who built something lasting from nothing. That transformation was the real victory. Not the court case or the money or even the partnership, but the internal shift from running to standing, from hiding to showing up, from surviving to truly living. As Alara turned to go inside and start her day, she touched the spot over her heart where the locket used to rest. The weight was gone, but the love remained, would always remain. "Thank you, Lily," she whispered to the morning air, "for teaching me that love means fighting, that mothers protect, that some things are worth risking everything for." She'd failed to protect her daughter, would carry that grief forever, but she'd honored Lily's memory by becoming someone who protected others, who fought for the vulnerable, who built safe spaces in a harsh world. That was legacy. That was love. That was enough. Alara walked into her kitchen, warm and welcoming, smelling of coffee and possibility, and got to work. She had a community to feed, a life to live, a future to build. And for the first time since she could remember, she was genuinely looking forward to all of it.